This happened about 15 years ago when I was 10 years old. My grandfather had passed away, and in our culture, we cremate the dead with a full ceremony, washing and dressing the body, covering it with flowers and powders, and then carrying it to the cremation ground while chanting the name of Lord Ram. I wasn't close to my grandfather. I barely remember ever talking to him, though my parents say I was attached to him as a small child. All I knew was that everyone in the family respected him. He was the head of everything. I was supposed to stay at my aunt's house that night, but being the sneaky kid I was, I waited until no one was paying attention and followed my mom when she left for the funeral. I stayed far behind her, walking quietly so no one would notice. When I got to my grandfather's house, the rituals had already started. His body had been cleaned and prepared, wrapped in white cloth and placed on a bamboo stretcher. My dad and uncles were there, along with someone else I didn't recognize. They lifted the body and started the slow walk to the cremation grounds, chanting the name of Lord Ram over and over. I followed them from a distance. The cremation ground was outside the main part of town. It felt huge to me, especially as a child. It wasn't a well-kept place, just open land, weeds, dirt paths, and rows of old memorial platforms that marked where people had been cremated over the years. Some looked like they hadn't been visited in decades. I stayed back and watched. There was a lot of crying. People threw flowers. The body was placed on a wooden pyre, and soon the fire was lit. I didn't know what I was supposed to feel. I didn't feel sad, just quiet, confused, detached. After a while, I got bored. My legs were tired, and I wandered off a little, eventually sitting on one of the old platforms nearby. I remember thinking it looked like a step or a bench. I sat down, and before I knew it, I had fallen asleep. When I woke up, it was almost completely dark. The fire had died down to embers, glowing faintly. The crowd was gone, every single person. No chanting, no talking, nothing but the sound of crickets and the occasional dog barking far away. I stood up quickly, confused and scared. I looked around but didn't see anyone. I called out for my mom, for anyone, but there was no answer. I started walking, thinking maybe they were still nearby. Then the fear hit me, hard. It was this cold, creeping feeling that I was being watched. Not like someone hiding behind a tree, but like the whole place was watching. I turned around a few times. Still nothing. Just rows and rows of stone platforms and fading names. I started crying and running, hoping someone would hear me. I tried to head toward the main road, but I had no idea where I was going. The cemetery felt endless, and worse, I realized I was running deeper into it, not out. That's when I started hearing footsteps. They matched mine. Every time I stopped, they stopped. Every time I moved, they followed. Just a little behind me. Close enough that it felt like someone could reach out and grab me at any second. I turned around again. No one. The fear got worse. My legs were shaking. My chest hurt from crying. But I kept running. Eventually, I reached the edge of the trees and saw an opening up ahead. There was a small pond, the community bathing area. I saw shapes, people, my family. I was sure of it. I ran toward them as fast as I could, but then, just as I stepped out of the trees, I felt it, a hand on my shoulder, cold, heavy, not pulling me or pushing me, just resting there, like it had been waiting. I froze. I couldn't scream, couldn't move. My whole body went cold, like my blood had stopped flowing. It felt like I stood there for minutes, even though it was probably just a second or two. Then everything went black. The next thing I remember, I was lying on the ground near the pond. My aunt was holding me and crying. Other relatives were crowding around, shouting my name. I had passed out. I was sick for days after that. High fever, nightmares. I stopped visiting that town altogether. I couldn't sleep in the dark for years without waking up in a cold sweat. convinced someone was standing next to me. Even now, sometimes I'll wake up in the middle of the night and feel something on my shoulder. Just the weight of a hand, not grabbing, not hurting, just there. My aunt later told me that the platform I had slept on was meant for people who had no family left, the ones no one visits or prays for anymore. She said sometimes those souls feel lonely, that they reach out to whoever they can. Maybe they just didn't want to be alone, and maybe they still don't. The first time my aunt mentioned the name, my mom didn't think much of it. We were sitting around her kitchen table just catching up, sipping coffee, and my aunt laughed and said, "My son's got an imaginary friend, calls him Michael." Mom smiled, distracted. "Oh yeah? Apparently he plays basketball with him all the time." She didn't say anything at first, just nodded and let the conversation drift elsewhere. But something about it stayed with her. See, my middle brother, Travis, passed away back in 2005. His full name was Travis Michael, and my cousin was born years after he died. He never met Travis, never saw pictures. No reason to know that name. Still, my mom chalked it up to coincidence. Kids have wild imaginations. They hear a name at daycare, mix it up in their heads, and before you know it, Michael's dunking basketballs in the living room at 3 a.m. But it didn't stop there. A few weeks later, my aunt brought it up again. She seemed more unsettled this time. Apparently, my cousin started saying that Michael was hurt, that he had an owie. Nothing new for a 5-year-old to talk like that, but he always pointed to his throat, never anywhere else. My aunt asked him once, "What happened to Michael?" He just said, "He got hurt. He can't talk right." After a few weeks, my mom stopped by to visit. She was sitting on the couch, flipping through TV channels, when my aunt walked in with her son. The boy froze as soon as he saw my mom, just stood there at the entrance to the living room and stared. Then he turned and went right back to his room. My aunt followed, crouched down, and asked him why he didn't say hello. A few moments later, she came back out and sat beside my mom on the couch. Her face was pale. He said, "You're Michael's mom." My mom said her hands went cold. She hadn't introduced herself, hadn't said anything, and my cousin somehow knew. Later, they decided to test it. My aunt pulled out an old photo album and set it in front of her son. "Can you show me your friend?" she asked. My cousin flipped through a few pages, mostly ignoring the pictures. Then he stopped, pressed his finger to one image, an old snapshot of my brother Travis, probably 17 at the time, wearing his high school basketball jersey. "That's Michael," he said. He said it casually, confidently. When I heard about all this, I didn't know what to believe. It felt too strange to be coincidence. So the next time I was in town, I dropped by. My cousin was in the kitchen when I walked in, coloring something at the table. He looked up, and for a moment, he just stared at me. Then he turned to my aunt and whispered something. She looked over at me with wide eyes. He said, "That's Michael's brother." I didn't say anything, didn't know what to say. Eventually, my cousin stopped talking about Michael. My aunt said it happened gradually, less basketball at night, fewer drawings. He just moved on the way kids do. But once in a while, he still pauses when he sees old family pictures, especially if Travis is in them. Here's the kicker. We never really talked about how Travis died, not in front of the younger kids. It isn't something you just talk about everywhere. He'd been riding an ATV at the sand dunes near San Luis Obispo when something went wrong. He hit the ground hard. The impact shattered his Adam's apple. He couldn't breathe. By the time they reached him, it was already too late. A freak accident, the doctor said. A 1 in a million kind of thing. My cousin never heard about that. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe he heard the name somewhere, saw a photo without realizing, picked up more than anyone noticed. There are things we don't understand, things we can't explain with science or logic, or comforting little phrases like, "Kids have wild imaginations." Some spirits linger. Some names echo long after the voices behind them go silent. And some bonds, don't break, even after goodbye. We lived in a small house tucked away at the end of a cul-de-sac. It was just us, my parents, my sister, and me. We didn't have a lot back then, but I was too young to care. My memories of that time are scattered, like puzzle pieces that don't always fit together. Certain things are crystal clear, others just flickers. But what I remember, and what my parents have filled in, has stuck with me for life. According to them, the house didn't waste time getting strange. They say weird things started happening not long after we moved in, mostly at night. It always began the same way. The floorboards upstairs would creak, as if someone was slowly walking down the hallway, always starting from the far end, always heading toward my room. My mom said the footsteps sounded like someone pacing, heavy, slow, and deliberate. My dad would go up every time, thinking maybe I had gotten out of bed, but I'd always be in my room. Sometimes, when he came up too late, he'd find me at the bottom of the stairs, crying. No idea how I got there, no memory of walking down. I'd just be sitting there, in the dark, staring up like I had been dropped off. They said I used to talk about an old man in the closet. I'd apparently say he didn't like when I cried, and that he would whisper my name when the lights were off. I don't remember saying that, but my parents swear I did. They chalked it up to a wild toddler imagination, but they started keeping the closet door shut. The first year was mostly harmless. Lights flickering, toys moving slightly from where we left them, cabinets swinging open by morning. One time, all the dining chairs were pushed a foot back from the table, perfectly aligned. A glass shattered on the counter when no one was in the kitchen. Still, it was all small enough to ignore. Then came the night that changed everything. My dad was reading me a story in the upstairs loft. It was a cozy little space, carpeted, kind of tucked between rooms. My wooden train set was laid out on the floor, a simple oval with a small bridge on one end, nothing fancy. While my dad read, we both heard a soft bell ring. Then the train moved. It rolled forward, slowly, without anyone touching it. We watched as it went around the track, up the small ramp, and stopped right at the top of the bridge. It shouldn't have made it that far. There were no batteries, no slope, no explanation. My dad just froze. He didn't say anything. I looked at him, expecting him to explain it, maybe laugh it off, but he didn't. His face was blank, like he was trying to make sense of what just happened. Then he called for my mom. She came in, saw the train, saw me visibly shaking, and asked what was going on. My dad explained. She stood there for a second, then said, "Maybe the floor is uneven." But even she didn't sound convinced. That night, I slept between my parents. Later that week, something else happened, something my parents still bring up to this day. My sister, still in diapers, was found standing in the hallway at 3 a.m., just staring at my bedroom door. Not crying, not saying a word, just standing there, perfectly still, like she was waiting for something to open it. One night, I woke up crying uncontrollably. I didn't know why, I just felt terrified. My mom rushed upstairs and said the hallway smelled weird, burnt almost. She opened the bathroom door and found smoke filling the air. Inside, the shower curtain was on fire. She screamed for my dad. He ran in, grabbed my sister and me, and we all ran barefoot into the yard. The fire department showed up quickly and put it out before it reached the bedrooms. But the damage was bad. Blackened ceiling, melted fixtures. The wiring in that corner of the house was completely fried. The official cause? Faulty outlet near the sink. But it never felt like that to us. Something about it just seemed intentional. After that, my parents didn't hesitate. We packed up what we could and left. We moved in with my grandparents for a few months while they looked for a new place. We never went back. Even now, I dream about that house sometimes. I'll walk through it in silence. Rooms I haven't seen in years come back perfectly, like they've been waiting in the back of my brain. But there's always this presence, this weight in the air, like I'm not alone, like someone is following me room to room, just out of sight. My parents still try to explain it away. Maybe the place had bad energy. Maybe it was all just timing, fear, and imagination. But I don't buy that. I think something was living in that house. I think it had once been a man, maybe even the previous owner, someone who had died there and didn't or couldn't move on. And I think I ended up in his room. He didn't want me there. I think he tried to scare us off. The noises, the toys, moving me at night, whispering, my sister staring at my door like something was behind it. And when that didn't work, when we stayed too long, he burned us out. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we hadn't left. If we'd stayed even one more week. Would the fire have been worse? Would we have all made it out? Because the way that house felt near the end, it didn't feel like home. It felt like a warning.